In 2004, my family took a vacation to Newfoundland. One of the places we camped was Gros National Park, which is located on the western side of the island on the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It was that summer, 20 years ago, that I fell in love with the landscape. When we traveled there, we went with our children and my parents, and we hit the touristy sites. But my mom claims that at the time I said, one day I will be coming back here for an artist residency. Well, in the fall of 2023, that dream was fulfilled. I was artist in residence for Parks Canada at Gros National Park for 6 weeks. In September of this year, I returned there to continue my work. So today, I'm going to share with you the aching beauty of Gros Morne. Together, we will walk some of the most beautiful hikes in Canada, and I will talk to you briefly about how this magnificent landscape has inspired my current work. So strap on your hiking boots, and if you're unsure about walking on rocks, I suggest that you bring along some hiking poles as well, and don't forget your camera. You are flying into Deer Lake, a small town in western Newfoundland. You can see looking out your window that this landscape is very different from what you're used to. There are barren spots and rolling hills and lots of trees and rock. Well, you can see why Newfoundland is called the Rock. You've rented your car and you've driven now to Woody Point. Woody Point is about an hour away from Deer Lake, and this is where you can find me. We're going to start our adventure at one of my very favorite places. It's in downtown Woody Point. Now, Woody Point's an interesting town. It has a very small population of folks who stay year-round. Its population is a whopping 224, but it is a real tourist destination. It boasts a lot of great events like Writers at Woody Point, which attracts Canada's best and most well-known writers every August. Louise Penny was even here last year. Some writers, like Lawrence Hill, have second homes here. So before we hit the hiking trails, I thought I'd take you to my favorite coffee shop. That's that red building right there, Galliot's Studios. Welcome to Galliot's. Now, we've just gone through the shop and ordered our coffee, and we are standing on the deck looking back into the cafe. The cafe doubles as a pottery studio for Jen Galliot, the proprietor. Now, the beautiful thing about this deck is that it looks out over Bonne Bay. Bonne Bay, by the way, is spelled B-O-N-N-E, and even though it looks like it should be pronounced Bonne Bay, they pronounce it Bonne Bay. So that's where we are, and we're going to get pretty comfortable in these chairs while we drink our coffee, watch for whales, and maybe have one of those large ginger snap cookies she sells. Right, finished your coffee? We're going to head out on our first hike, which is going to be to the Tablelands. Now, the Tablelands is perhaps one of the most famous parts of Gros National Park. It is located not too far outside of Woody Point. It's about a 10-minute drive down the road, and the drive itself is gorgeous. The Tablelands are a unique geological formation where the Earth's mantle was thrust up to the surface millions of years ago through the collision of ancient continents. It is one of only 3 places on Earth that you can actually walk on the Earth's mantle, and of these places, it is the most accessible. The barren orange landscape here is composed of peridotite rock. This is such a rare and exceptional ecosystem that it has been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its international geological significance. And if you're not confident about walking on rocks, don't worry. You can walk into the Tablelands on this handy boardwalk. Now, despite the harsh conditions, including unstable slopes and toxic soil, the Tablelands ecosystem is home to a unique and resilient plant community, including endangered plant species. You can see on this photo that the plants live at the lower elevations here. Both common juniper and trailing juniper grow on the peridotite barrens. Many junipers in the Tablelands have these knotted and contorted trunks as a result of root damage. Some of these shrubs have 7 meters of trunk, but because of the way they're twisted, their stems lie flat on the ground, and so their actual height is only about 10 centimeters. This juniper tree is estimated to be around 300 years old. Black spruce and eastern larch are common here, with balsam fir, green alder, and even a few white pines thrown into the mix. Churning soil, lack of nutrients, and high winds deform these trees and slow their growth. but they do not stop them from producing seeds, and so these species thrive here, even though the conditions are really challenging. These are carnivorous plants. They're called pitcher plants. They thrive in the nutrient-poor soils, supplementing their diet by trapping and consuming insects. But they don't eat the insects outright. They trap them in their hollow leaves. There, the insects drown in rainwater that has collected in them. And then other insects, rotifers, and bacteria break the pieces down into smaller and smaller components to be absorbed by the plant. The tablelands are a testament to Earth's dramatic geological history, formed by ancient continental collisions millions of years ago. Today, it serves as both a natural laboratory for scientists and a sanctuary for endangered plant species that have adapted to its unique conditions. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can even see caribou grazing on them. So now that we've had a good look at the tablelands and we've spent some time walking around on Earth's mantle, I thought I'd take you to Trout River. It's just a few minutes down the road. You can see on this map that Trout River has a little green border around it. That means that, like the other towns in this area, Trout River is not actually in Gros National Park. These communities were already here when the park was established. Even though they are surrounded by the park, when you're in these communities, you're not technically in the park. So you don't need your park pass to walk around Trout River. One of the things that's really nice along the edge of the beach in Trout River is this boardwalk, which is lovely to walk on if you don't want to walk on the beach sand. Now, we can use this boardwalk to walk the entire length of this beach. The water that we see on the right here is not Trout River. It's the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Trout River comes along in front of that mountain that you see in front of you. And there's a marina there and lots of fishing boats. But when I'm here, I like to walk along the beach. I really enjoy seeing what the tides have brought in. Whoops, I've gone backwards there. I really enjoy seeing what the tides have brought in. I have found bones and shells here, along with all kinds of other treasures. This is a rack line. Rack lines are important to me in my artwork. Now, a rack line is a line of organic material and also inorganic materials like plastics that are tossed onto the shore at high tide. So a rack line represents the furthest reach of the high tide. And as the water pulls back and the tide goes down, these organisms are left on the beach. And if you look closely, what you see there are many tiny little ecosystems. Rack lines are one of the spaces that can give scientists indications about climate change, and they can also speak to the health of the ocean. I also use rack lines, these in-between liminal spaces, as an important metaphor in my work. We're standing right now on one of the ends of the Trout River Beach, and we're looking up at a trail called the Eastern Point Trail, and this is the next hike that we're going to do. So make sure your knees are in good shape because we're heading up top there. And the first thing we have to do when we hike this trail is to go up about 100 steps. And once you've made it to the top, you can look down on Trout River. This is a really neat view because you can see the beach in its entirety. And in that sort of inlet area you see there, in 2014, a blue whale that had got caught in the ice and died was beached right there. And it caused quite a headache and a real stink for the local community. If you're interested in that story, on CBC Gem, there's a documentary about it called Trout River and the Blue Whale. I invite you to check that out. This is another view of Trout River. Technically outside the park, the Eastern Point Trail in the end is my favorite one of all the ones that I hiked when I was at Gros Morne. It is wild and it is beautiful. What we're looking at here, in addition to the geology of the area, is a very thick mat of tuckamore. Now, tuckamore is the word for trees that have been shaped by the weather, by the wind. They have very interesting shapes and they tangle together to create these giant mats like the one that you see here. Now, if you're so inclined, you can actually walk on these mats. And underneath them, you'll find tunnels and shelters created by the tuckamore. What you see here on the right is another example of tuckamore. And again, you can kind of see the shapes of these trees, how they're bending back from the edge of the water, which is to your left. I think what is so powerful about this walk is the energy of the water hitting the shore. And what you get is this sensory experience where you maybe feel the spray sometimes, but you hear the roar of the water. You feel the vegetation beneath your feet. And you're also pretty much alone. When I first hiked this a year ago, I hiked it all by myself. Now, this hike puts you in touch with the wild and natural environment that sets Gros Morne and its surrounding areas apart as something special. It is so elemental. Speaking of the wild, this trail is used heavily by moose and caribou, so you have to watch your step. This is the spot where the trail ends for me. I mean, I think it goes on a little further, but it's a lot harder going after this point. When I got here the first time, when I was all by myself, I sat in this grassy area and I paid attention to the raging water below me, to the beautiful trees and the vegetation around me, and I became very sad because I thought about how we are destroying all of this beautiful, beautiful earth. And as I sat there, after having these quite depressing thoughts, this feeling of calm descended on me, and I looked out at the water. And I saw this rainbow just shimmer there for only a few seconds before it disappeared. And at the same time, I heard a voice in my head that said, everything is going to be all right. Well, I don't know about you, but all this walking has made me tired. So let's take a break from the hiking and head over to Bonne Bay to do a bit of sea kayaking. Bonne Bay is a saltwater bay that is off of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and Bonne Bay is where I focus my attention when I'm in Newfoundland. It is a body of water with many temperaments, sometimes even within a single day. But right now, for our sea kayaking adventure, the water is so calm it looks like a mirror. Gros Morne National Park has 3 different forest ecoregions. In and around Bonne Bay, you have boreal forest, so the trees here are mostly conifers. And I was told that when you see deciduous trees in patches among the conifers, that's a sign that there used to be a small settlement in that area. Because, of course, when people settle, they plant trees for other reasons. And a lot of these small settlements had to close down and move when the park was established. This slide shows the tablelands in the background. So we're on Bonne Bay looking back at the tablelands. And beneath us, there's a lot of sea life. In the deeper parts of the bay, there are large marine mammals. There are minke whales and different species of dolphin. There's tuna and sharks and mackerel and codfish and so on. And while I was there, I kind of learned to read the water. You can see different patterns in the water, and those patterns can tell you whether there is some activity near the surface caused by fish and marine mammals. But when you look at the surface of the water today, you would almost think there's nothing going on underneath. But don't be fooled. You feel rested? Because it's time for another hike. This map shows Green Point. Green Point is a really magical place because there you can actually walk back in time. Now, for Green Point, I recommend that you join my friend Chris, who is standing there in the green coat. She's a Parks Canada interpreter, and she leads tours of these areas. And it's really, really a good idea to hook up with a tour at Green Point, and really for any of the trails where they are offered, because these park interpreters know so much and they can share so much information. Green Point Trail is one of the shortest hikes at Gros Morne, but it is also one of the most impactful. It is a geologist's dream. Each 1 meter step that you take northward along the cliffs carries you past about 60,000 years of sediment accumulation. For each meter, 60,000 years back in time. Altogether, the cliffs at Green Point represent a 30 million year record of sediment accumulation and marine life in the Iapetus Ocean, which used to be there. The beds of shale and limestone here have been raised up and tilted. So you start your hike here in the north, where the rock beds are the youngest, from the early Ordovician period. So they're only about 480 million years old. And you end up in the late Cambrian, which is even older. So just to situate you, the Cambrian period was the time when we see the emergence of complex life. And to make things even more exciting, there's a layer in which some very interesting fossils appear. This layer is right between the Cambrian and Ordovician sediments. So these fossils are significant because their existence in this layer determines a very precise boundary between the two periods. So scientists come here and they can actually see and study this division between the two major geological time periods. Boy, that was exhausting, so I think you need another rest. So I'm going to take you on a boat tour. We're headed to Western Brook Pond, but wait, don't rest yet, because first we have to get there, and while we head out, you better dig into your pockets, because this one comes with a price tag. About $89 per person, plus HST. It's a 3-kilometer hike from the parking lot to the boat, but it's really worth it if you can do it. Now, if you have mobility issues, or if you're just too tired to walk this far, there is a shuttle bus you can take. The rest of us will meet you there. Western Brook Pond is located in the Long Range Mountains, and the Long Range Mountains are the most northern section of the Appalachian Mountains. And so you're surrounded by these deep rock walls. This is a 16-kilometer long lake. It's actually a freshwater fjord, and it has a depth of 165 meters. This lake was carved out by glaciers during the Ice Age, 25,000 to 10,000 years ago. After the glaciers melted all those years ago, the land rebounded and the fjord was cut off from the sea. And that's why you get kind of confused. You go, I thought we were in a fjord, but it's a lake. So it is. Now it's a lake. And they call it a pond to make it even more confusing. The salt water was eventually flushed from this fjord. So now what you've got is extremely pure fresh water. The lake waters here are pristine, and they've had very little impact from human activities. The tour boat operators had to undergo special certification to ensure that their operations would have minimal impact on the environment. Now, if you're really adventurous and an experienced hiker, you can hike up to the top of the gorge here, but not with me. If you don't like the weather in Newfoundland, just wait a minute. When we set out, it was dark and the water was choppy. But now that we're getting to the end of the boat tour, the water is like glass and the sun has come out. The long hike back to the car is so beautiful. You hardly notice that your legs are getting tired. So you want to go to the beach? Let's head up to the northernmost boundary of the park to Shallow Bay. Shallow Bay has the longest sandy beach in the park. It is a place of dynamic edges. Now we'll start off with the dunes. These dunes grow and change. The grasses that you see in the foreground provide structure for the dunes with their root systems. This is why dune habitats are protected in many areas, here too, because too much foot or bike traffic over these dunes ruins their stability. This photo shows the dunes and the beach beyond them. The roots of the dune grasses are visible in the center of this photo. You can see, I think, how long they are. They're very, very long roots. And they need to be because they need to go deep to keep the grasses in place. And then again, the grasses provide the structure for the dunes. Now that we're on the beach, you might notice that there is some coarse green sand. Now that's the light colored sand you see in the picture. Well, surprise, this is not sand at all, but crushed shells of small mollusks. This is a view through my macro lens. The green spines that you see are actually sea urchin spines. In order for there to be the amount of green sand that we see here, and there is a lot, trust me, we must conclude that there are lots of sea urchins in the water. And clearly, there are lots of other organisms in the water too, and that's a good thing. Here's some more tuckamore. Remember tuckamore, those trees that are sculpted and shaped by the wind? I'm showing you this particular swath of tuckamore because it is special. It is completely undisturbed by people, and that's a rare thing. No one has ever cut through it, and so they have protected it. You can't go there. Speaking of trees, the conditions in this spot are not conducive to verticality for trees. The branches that try to move upward are damaged, so the tree ends up growing sideways across the ground. The trees in this particular area do not live very long in tree terms. The one in the foreground here could be as old as 50 years. Hey, how are your knees and ankles doing? Are your quads good and strong? Then come along with my friend Anne and me, and we will show you something really cool. I have to tell you though, it is a tough hike for us flatlanders. Don't say I didn't warn you. This rock face is only accessible at low tide. The fossils here date back to the Ordovician period. They are all over the rock face here. Many of them are high above our heads. This picture shows the beauty in the intersection between the geological and the biological that you see everywhere here in Gros, Morne. By the way, I'm grateful that you and Anne picked up lots of plastic debris from this beach. Lots of people do, but the amount of plastic and other junk that finds itself on these pristine shores is distressing. Thankfully, there are organizations committed to cleaning up and repurposing the plastic that is so commonplace here. But right now, it's time to head back. I don't like driving once the sun starts setting because I don't want to encounter any moose on the road. And that brings me around to our last stop for today. Look, I know this slideshow has only scratched the surface. You don't give me enough time to go too deep. But you could spend years at Gros Morne National Park and not see everything it has to offer. I have only seen such a tiny amount myself. But I want to end today's presentation with a trip to Norris Point. This is the most important place for me because it is here that my art finds its way into the narrative. You can see on the map that Norris Point is actually quite close to Woody Point, where we started our adventure. During the peak tourist season, there is a water taxi that runs between the 2 points, but it closes down in September, and that's when I was there, so the only alternative is to take the highways. What is a 10-minute boat ride becomes a 1-hour drive. I have to say, though, that it is the most beautiful commute you will ever take. And I'm just going to show you a couple pictures of the commute. This is the Bombay Aquarium and Research Center, also known as the Marine Station. It is an extension of Memorial University's Corner Brook campus. Since it is not technically in Gros Morne National Park, I only spent 1 day there last year. But this year, I spent a whole week at the facility. They are supportive of the work I am doing, and they gave me access to anything I wanted to work with. I also stayed there. They have dorms for students and researchers. Now, when you stand at the wharf by the Marine Station, you get a fantastic view of Shag Cliff. The cliff gets its name from the shag, which is a local term for the cormorant. And they also have other bird species that nest along its rocky edges. Inside of the Marine Station, there is an aquarium where you can see lots of cool marine organisms that they study there. And they always have a big release at the end of the season. They release them back into the bay. I don't have a lot of time left to talk about the work that I'm currently doing, but the overarching theme of my new works is change, specifically climate change, and its impacts on the ecosystems and coastal communities here. To get into it in any detail about the works would require a whole separate talk, but I thought I'll just give you a small taste of some of them. I have a series of macro photograph portraits of organisms that I find along the rack line. This photo shows the remains of a bryozoan colony on a piece of seaweed that's about 1 inch long. Bryozoans are unicellular organisms that colonize on seaweed. This particular kind is an invasive species called coffin box, whose populations have been exploding in the warming waters all over the planet. These are harmful because they destabilize kelp populations. One of the biggest threats to our oceans is marine litter, and in particular, ghost fishing gear. The term ghost gear refers to any fishing gear that's been abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded. This type of marine pollution is some of the most harmful debris found in our oceans, and it can be fatal to fish. It still goes fishing, even though no people are around. Marine mammals and other marine life are endangered. They pose a navigation hazard, then they also break down into microplastics. So I've made a series of digitized lumen photographs inspired by the work that's being done by organizations such as Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative, AHOY for short, to educate people and to clean up ghost gear. We See Change, Tales from Bombay is a multimedia artwork featuring 2 videos side by side, narrated with stories told by Bombay residents about the significant changes they've seen in their communities and in the environment during their lifetimes. And I have to just go off script here and say that story that we had read for the children at the beginning talked about the seasons and the different things that make the seasons what they are. But you know what? The stories that these people have told me over and over again is that the seasons are changing. They don't have snow till April anymore. They're hardly getting any snow at all, and things like that. So all of that comes out in this piece. But one of the neat things also about this piece, and you can see the little inset picture, is that one of the videos is going to include footage provided by Ahoy. They have this ROV, which is a remotely operated vehicle, and it goes to the bottom of the bay, and it has a lot of footage of marine life that are in the deepest waters of Bombay, and they have agreed to let me use some of that footage for this piece. So I'm really excited about that. One of the hallmarks of my art practice is my emphasis on experience. It isn't enough for me to make a work that's about something. I want to do work that stems from something deep and layered, something I've lived and been part of. So when I was given a chance to participate in some actual research on the changes in Bombay this past year, I jumped at it. In this photo, I'm talking with Bob Scott, the director of the Marine Station. We are heading out to take temperature, salinity, and dissolved oxygen readings in the water at different locations and at different depths on the bay. Now, you're welcome to join us, but beware that the water's really choppy, so I hope you have good sea legs. And what you see through that window there is the device that we use to take all of the measurements. Okay, let's hope this works. No, it's not gonna. Okay, I had a video here. You're gonna have to imagine the video in your head. Quick, look over there. It's a huge pod of white-sided Atlantic dolphins. Bob tells me he has never seen such a large group of them. There must be over 100. We encounter this huge pod of dolphins 3 times on this expedition. Oh, there you're gonna see it. And I'll just wrap up while you watch. I know I'm out of time. I have to wrap it up. There's so much to share. So if you're interested, I've got business cards at the back, and my website is on there. If you log into my website, right on the front page, there is a link to a blog that I kept while I was in Newfoundland, both last year for the artist residency and this year. And I encourage you to check it out if you want to see more of these wonderful places that I've been. So thank you very much.